Okay, so yeah, that should be picking up. I realized that on YouTube I had set it to private, which means nobody could view it. So I reset them to public. So hopefully you can all catch the recording. Anyway, where was I? Um, Presenter view. There we go. So yeah, this shift from transactional on the left to relationship marketing about retention, customer retention. We know that there are lots of figures thrown around, but in a nutshell, it's more expensive to recruit a customer than it is to retain a customer. If I was to ask you the costs that are associated with recruiting a customer, could you tell me what those are? You can just give me one example. Like, why does it cost, do you think, more to acquire a customer than it is to keep a customer? So, in order to acquire or get a customer, what do we need to do? That's it in a nutshell. I keep saying that in a nutshell. Advertising. Advertising is expensive, right? And it has a low hit rate. You know, it has a low. For example, if you do Google ads, like or social media ads, you know, it's expensive. The click through from ads is low and getting lower, right? So it's expensive. Even if you don't do ads, let's say you do search engine optimization. Are we all clear on what I mean by search engine optimization? If somebody asked you that, how would you answer them? What is SEO? Sorry, starting my lecture with a quiz. What do you think search engine optimization means? What does it involve? Don't worry if you don't know. I can tell you, but I just thought it's kind of interesting just to get a little sense of your own knowledge in this area. Yeah. So, like for example, you know, if I type in, where are we? Let me get my browser open here. If I type in something like I want to buy a snowboard, which I don't because I've got one already, but say I did. There we go. So that's the Google search results, right? And basically, SEO is um, trying to make sure that we get to the top of those results. Right? That's what search engine, the word is optimize, optimization, right? So, how do I optimize my website to ensure that I will appear at least on the first page of results, but preferably near the top? Okay, that's SEO. Now, if you're operating in China, for example, where Google is not actively used or even allowed in some cases, you'll have other search engines, right? That will have a similar approach. Okay, the same principle applies. How do we, um, how can we optimize our digital marketing to ensure is not the right word because that almost implies that you will definitely appear and it's very hard to get onto the first page. But let's say increase the chances of getting on to the first page. That's a better way to put it rather than ensure that you do. So because it's super competitive to get on this page, and you know, that's not surprising, is it? Because there's a lot of people that are trying to sell you a snowboard and they range from big companies like this one, Burton, which is a big American snowboard company, sponsors a lot of the athletes. I don't know if you watched, did you watch any of the Olympic Games, of the Winter Olympics? No? Anybody watch the Winter Olympics? Oh, I'm surprised. There was British athletes. There was quite a few Chinese athletes as well in snowboarding and women's downhill skiing, and really interesting. And figure skating, where the Netherlands was like the winner. So anyway, yeah. So you saw these guys, some of these big companies like Burton, sponsoring the athletes, right? Because whenever they would go to the bottom, they would quickly take their snowboard off, hold it up, and you'd have the brand name on the base of the snowboard, so the camera could see Burton or whatever the snowboard was made by. And that's, of course, advertising as well. But that costs, right? Because what you're trying to do there is you're trying to build brand awareness. Because, you guys maybe never heard of Burton before. And if you're not into snowboarding or winter sports, it's probably not, why would you? Why would you hear that brand? But say, for example, you decided you wanted to, get into that hobby or that sport, then you might see like a Chinese snowboarder going down, and then she lifts her board, and it's made by Burton, and you go, oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to check that out, and where can I buy it? And then then the sales process starts, right? This is why we call the sales funnel, right? It's like that. And so you're trying to get people into the top of the funnel. They see the Burton board. What do they do next? Oh, I'll just Google it, or I'll go online, check out their website. That's the next step, right? It's a journey. You're journeying down the funnel, right? And then you might buy it online, or more likely you might actually think, well, I don't know much about this sport. I think I'm going to go into a retailer, like a shop, and I'm going to speak to the person working there and find out more about it, all that. So, but anyway, back to SEO. SEO, getting onto the first page of the internet results is often maybe the top of the funnel, right? That first stage. Okay, there's different ways you can, you can go into that funnel. Every user's journey is unique. Just think for a moment the last thing you bought. I'm not really talking about a cup of coffee or something like that on campus. Think about something more significant you bought, right? Maybe it was a flight or a holiday or something like that. Think about your own journey. Think about all the touch points on the journey, right? And think about how the company that you finally bought the service or the product from influenced you on that journey. Why did you end up with that company? Why did you end up with that service provider or person selling the product? Ask yourself that question and think about your journey. Even map it out. Even just, it doesn't take long to do it. And just think about how you were impacted by different elements of marketing through that journey. Okay, and that's an interesting exercise to do, particularly if you're studying marketing, because you're not just looking at it as a normal consumer, you're looking at it from the other side. How did the business impact me? Could they have done better? Were there any touch points where actually they let you down a little bit? Maybe, they weren't, they didn't respond quickly enough. They didn't give you the information you needed. I don't know, whatever. Now, I could ask you, but I don't think I need to ask you that at the moment in the lecture. You can just think about that. And particularly if it's a service more than a product, even better, because we're studying services marketing. So have you been to the doctors? Have you gone to the dentist? No, hopefully not. It's not a pleasant experience necessarily. So, what are all those kind of, touch points and so on. So I just wanted to tell you that SEO is part of your marketing mix, part of your services marketing mix. If you're a service, you want to try and make sure as much as you can that your link appears somewhere, preferably at the top of these search results. But they are difficult to do. And you can see, of course, at the top, you have sponsored results, a couple there. And then you get down to, you can actually hide those. That's quite a new feature, actually, where you can hide the ads, the sponsored posts. And then you get down to what are called the organic posts, organic. So organic means kind of more natural. They call it organic because you're not paying to be there. These two at the top, surface to air sports, it's interesting because they're actually very close to where I live. And I've actually been in that store several times. I've checked out their website. So clearly, because I'm logged in with my Gmail, it's picking up on my past behavior. And it's serving that ad because it might think, oh, well, he lives quite in the proximity of that shop. Let's serve him the ad. That's quite smart because that's a small business. You know, just a few guys working there, and they sell different things. So that's interesting. Um, and then you've got this other company I don't know. I've heard of them, but I don't know them well. And then you have these organic, and they're called organic or natural results because you're not paying to be there. Okay. And you've probably noticed I've just skipped past this places. So this Google Places, or I think it's still called Google My Business, GMB, is kind of a unique feature of Google, and it's linked in with Google Maps, which I'm sure you use when you're here regularly. And of course, if you click on here, which I won't bother, you can get more information that's kind of like location based information, but you also have some useful images, like a little thumbnail image, which might be kind of, there's one in Southampton, for example. Here they've got an image. So evidence suggests that things like images, what else do you see on the ad here, or on the listing here, I should say, that might encourage you or might influence you to click the link? Apart from the image, is there anything else there that would have an influence on you? Looking at these three, what else might you pay attention to? The star rating. Exactly. So we can see this one here has, by the looks of it, the best star rating. It's got 150 ratings, which is more than the others. And it looks like it's got completely 5 stars. Okay. Whereas this one, Route 1, still pretty good. 4 stars, but 1 missing, and then 4 stars, but less reviews. So things like this are obviously, impactful in terms of your behavior, right? So I hope you're all clear on SEO. Have you studied in semester 1 or this semester? Are you doing anything on digital marketing? You are. Have you done that module already, or are you currently doing it? This term, this semester, right? Can I ask who's teaching that one? Pardon? Okay. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I know Mohammed well. That's great. Well, I'm sure Mohammed, if he hasn't already done so, will cover SEO. But again, if you're not, he won't mind me saying this, but if you're a little bit sketchy, a bit unclear as to what SEO is and means, do ask him. And of course, do your own research into SEO. It's an interesting area. I don't know if you ever use LinkedIn Learning. Has anybody gone into that? I mean, they have so many courses on there, and they've got probably literally over 100 on SEO. It's a big topic. Okay. Now, of course, what's coming in more recently is something called GEO, which is generative engine optimization, which is all about your AI summary. Now, it hasn't happened here, but if I was to search, let's say, for a snowboarding ski destination or something like that, rather than an actual product, let's say a destination, there's a good chance that you will find the AI summary at the top. So I don't know, if I was to put what resort is best for snowboarding, maybe, there we go. So now we get the AI, right? It hasn't done that because I just searched for a snowboard, like a single product. But typically, if you search for something like this, then you get this. Now, what's happening, and it's a big change in terms of digital marketing. Again, you can chat to Mohammed about this, but I think it's kind of good actually that we understand the overlap, because while I'm talking about services marketing, you need to be aware, because this is actually part of services marketing as well. So there's overlap here. It's not a bad thing necessarily. So you can see here, now what's happening increasingly, people aren't going any further than this. They're just reading this, but they're not going here. Now that's a problem for all these guys here that I'm scrolling, because all these guys here have been paying money and taking time to try to get their link to the top of the search results, assuming if they do get to the top, like for example, this one here, SNO ski holidays, best snowboard resorts Europe, that I will look at those, or even higher actually, these ones, which is a sponsored result. So snowboarding holidays have paid to be there. And I'll explain what I mean by paid in a minute. But what happens if I don't go any further than this? That's it. I've got all the information I need right there. I'm not going any further down. And that is a significant change right now. And a lot of companies, to be perfectly honest, they don't know quite how to react to this new dynamic because they're still learning how they can work with these Gemini search results to try and list there, and it's kind of open at the moment. Right now, there are certain aspects. So, for example, you can see here that there are links across on the right here. Best ski resorts for snowboarders, best top 10 best snowboarding resorts. Now, if you look at that, SNO, that is the same as this one, right? So they've actually managed to be featured in the AI results. And that's because when Gemini generates this, what we're looking at the moment at the top, it's looking for content that relates to my query. So in some ways, it hasn't changed massively. It's just that it's now being driven by AI, by a generative, search engine like in this case, Gemini, which of course is the Google AI, right? So I don't want to deviate into how we, optimize for AI, but that would be something A, to look into, and B, maybe to have a chat with Mohammed about, I wouldn't say like when he's just giving a lecture, because maybe say to him, you want to kind of understand more about that. But it's a very, very interesting area. I mean, people, graduates have full-time careers working in search optimization, and I'm absolutely sure, if not already, there will be actual careers in generative engine optimization, where you learn how to optimize for AI and how to help companies get listed here. Because being listed up here can make a huge difference to your revenue and your profitability. Okay? Because if you're not here, you're not seen. And if you're not seen, nobody knows about you. Okay? So that's an interesting and very, very dynamic area. Are there any questions on any of this? I mean, I mentioned about paid, didn't I? Who pays with Google Ads, for example? Well, who pays is the advertiser. We don't pay as the consumer. So if I click on if I click, I won't do it, but if I click on this link, this company, whatever they're called, Heidi.com, will pay Google for the click. Okay, and it can vary, but it can actually be quite a lot of money. It could be $4, $5, $6, or whatever that is in pounds, or even more. And the more popular the search term, the more you pay. Okay, so like if you're a bank and you're trying to sell insurance, that's a very competitive key term. Like if I was to type in household insurance, then, and say, for example, NatWest, the bank, was advertising their insurance, they could pay up to £7, £8, £9 just for that click. Yeah, exactly. Why do you think Google's so rich? I mean, honestly, it is the best business model in the world, probably even better than Amazon's, because essentially what they've done is they've created the platform, and that's where you go to search, and they have monetized the platform. That's what people do. They monetize the platform. Now, of course, what some of the big discussions at the moment is, will Google then start to allow a lot of advertising in the AI at the top? And then there's all this story about, can you trust AI? And is it fake? And all of that. So there's a huge, big kind of debate going on at the moment. It's all evolving, which means that in your position, you've got a nice opportunity now as a student of marketing, while this is evolving, to find out about it and almost kind of position yourself as a little bit of an expert in the field. Because if you then, are looking for a job here or back in your home country, and then you've got something smart to say about AI search and how you can kind of optimize for AI search, you will be quite attractive to an employer, because there's a good chance they won't know even as much as you know. And that's always a nice position to be in when you're having an interview, for a job, for example. So do think about this area. It's very, very interesting. Okay, we'll come away from that. And all of that started with, sorry, let me get it on here. All of that started by me asking, why is it more expensive to recruit than it is to keep, right? Almost forgot the original question. So we've seen, haven't we, in that last 10 minutes, the costs involved in advertising. And by the way, what I didn't mention is the time cost. Because you might be thinking, oh, well, the only cost is if you pay for the ad. Those lower links, those organic links, they're not paying anything. And that's right. I didn't mention that. If I click on one of those lower links, then nobody pays. However, that doesn't mean it's free. Why is it not free, do you think, to the business? Just because they don't directly pay Google for the click, to get there in the first place, what does that require? To make sure that your website is listed there on the first page, what do you need to be doing? It's probably not a fair question, because I didn't really explain the process, did I, for those lower links? So for the lower links, you need to spend time optimizing your website for the keywords that people will type in. So if I type in, a simple search like buying a snowboard, then they need to make sure that on their website, those keywords, obviously the keyword snowboard, appears in the right parts of the website. Now, I won't get into the technical details of that, because that would completely take another lecture. And it's something I think Mohammed will cover with you, or you can ask him. So my point is that isn't free, because if you're spending a lot of time as a business doing something, time isn't free. You either have to get one of your existing employees to do it, right? And you're paying them to do that, or you have to recruit a new employee, maybe one of you guys, to come in and help. Then I have to pay you, or I outsource it to an agency that are like expert in it, and I still have to pay them. So whatever way you look at it, it's money out. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that it's expensive, right? And it's better to retain your customers. Okay, so a good example of that, sorry, I will come out again. That's why I use my laptop, because it's a lot easier when I'm moving between things. So just in the same, the same topic of snowboarding, I'm just going to, so this is a small shop here. You can see it here. Give them some free advertising. Go to the next one. I don't know. These are different images. Oh, bad word. Excuse me. Yeah, these are all images of the shop, right? Anyway, I won't go through it. So this is a small shop near a place called Wareham, which is about, 20-minute drive from where I live. And I've been going to this shop for probably over 10 years now, maybe 12 years. So when my son was much younger, he got really interested in snowboarding, and I used to do it when I was younger as well. And I thought, okay, he's interested in doing snowboarding, I will take it up again, and I will introduce him to it. And now he loves it, and he's really good. And over the years, we have bought hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth of equipment from the guy Ben who runs this snowboarding shop. Hundreds of pounds, probably thousands, because we've bought snowboards, we've bought helmets, we've bought goggles, we've bought gloves, we bought jackets, we bought trousers. I don't know why I'm doing the actions, but anyway, we bought like a bunch of stuff, right? Because every time I go in there to buy, not even to buy something, maybe to get something else, I end up seeing something I like, or he tells me, "Hey, have you seen these jackets? They're the best thing." And recently we had our snowboards serviced, literally service marketing, serviced by Ben. What that means is when you use the snowboard, the base of the board should be nice and smooth, so it goes over the snow fast. But what happens over the days is it gets a bit scratched, it loses the wax that's on the surface, and it's not as good. So periodically you have to get it serviced. So he serviced both of the boards. So that was a service that he offers in addition to selling products. Okay, but the point I want to make is just how important it is to have this loyalty marketing, right? So he doesn't have to spend money on Google trying to catch my eyes. I'm not going to go to another store. I'm just going to go back to him. That's it, because he kind of lives and breathes snowboarding. He talks about it all the time. He knows everything about it. He's been doing it for years. He knows about the resorts. He knows about the latest brands. What. Now, of course, you can say, do you trust him? And yes, largely, yes, I know he wants to sell me something, but there is a trust there. Okay. And that's why retention is better than acquisition. But of course, you still have to acquire customers. You have to, but you want to keep them when you get them. That's key. How do you keep them? Well, of course, you keep them through service excellence, giving excellent service, having excellent knowledge, being trustworthy, all of that. Okay. And of course, as I'm doing now, I mean, there's not much chance that you're going to go to this shop and buy a snowboard. I realize that. But I might be talking to friends who live in Poole or nearby, and I might say, yeah, we always go to Big Dreams and check it out. Here's Ben's number, give him a call. There you go. That's referral marketing. So if you think about it there's at least there's three sources of profitability for him. One, he saves money in advertising. Two, he gets what's called lifetime value. So what I've just described earlier to you is a perfect example of lifetime value. Since my son was much younger, over the last 12 or 13 years, that's lifetime, right? Not literally your lifetime, but long term, how much you spend. That's called lifetime value. And then the third one is referral marketing. So I'm referring Big Dreams to friends of mine. And that's the most trustworthy form of marketing, because it's much more trustworthy than putting a search term into Google. If I personally tell a friend that's the place to go, then they'll go there. So so that's, I think, a nice example of, just from one slide. I realize I'm taking one slide and saying a lot about it, but I think it's important actually that I don't just skip through things, and I don't know that you don't know unless you tell me. So if I start saying, oh, search engine optimization, and you just sit there and go, okay, that's fine, you write it down. But unless you say to me, Philip, can you explain what that means? Or I'll either say, yes, I can, or I'll get another lecture to tell you in their module, whatever. So if there are any terms, don't sit there not knowing. Just say, what is that? Right? Don't worry about it. Like, there are so many acronyms: SEO, PPC, pay per click, right? Pay per click, that's ads, Google ads, right? There's so many acronyms in marketing. There's literally probably hundreds. And there's no way you're going to know all of them. But I think, I think, it's good that you have an all-around knowledge, really. Yeah, so basically, relationship marketing, it's what I described there with the big dream snowboarding, customer retention, long term loyalty, and a partner to be evolved. And it's interesting because, again, not to go on about it too long, but when I go into big dreams, I quite like going there, right? Because I feel like a big kid. Like I am just a big kid at heart, right? So I don't want to grow old. That's why I keep snowboarding. And it's good. It's just nice to have conversations about something you really love doing, right? Um, so when you are you familiar with the value proposition canvas? Yep. Okay. So there's this thing called jobs to be done. Have you come across that? Can you tell me how do you think about jobs to be done? Right? Can you remember what it says on the canvas? There's different types of jobs to be done. There's functional. But what are the other ones? Can you remember? It's probably not a fair question. It's quite specific, really. But don't worry if you can. I can tell you, but you can have a guess if you think. Jobs are not like when we buy a service, right? Like going to the snowboarding shop. Is that purely functional? Is it purely just a logical, practical thing, or is there more going on there? Do you think? Emotional. Thank you. Yeah, it's exactly it. That's one of the words that's used in the value proposition canvas. We don't just enable our customers to get a practical job done. We reach out to them at an emotional level. So when I go to Big Dreams, it's as much about emotion as it is about practical, right? So he can tell me, here's the snowboard, it's this length, it's this width, it's good for deep powder snow, or it's better for this kind of snow. Those are functional, practical questions. But I'm not only interested in that, am I? I'm going in and I see the snowboards there. If we look at the image again, I won't bring it up again. You remember the image a minute ago? That's the service scape, by the way. Do you remember we talked about the service scape? So the way he has laid out his store is the service scape. He has all the snowboards up on a rack. He's got doesn't sell clothes so much anymore, but they used to be around the corner. He's got all the helmets. He's even got a pool table there where he puts the boards down on the pool table. You know what I mean by pool, that game. And that's part of the whole image of Big Dreams, right? He's a guy probably in his 40s, but he dresses like with a baseball cap and a kind of ripped jeans, and he's that kind of guy, right? Because there's a thing about snowboarding where snowboarding is different than skiing. Snowboarders like to think of themselves as being a bit cooler than skiers, right? There's an image, there's an identity around snowboarding, and he plays on that. He may not say it, but that's exactly what he's doing. So when you go in there, the service scape, him as the owner, his knowledge that the other people that are there, it's all that snowboarding vibe. And you get that when you go in there at an emotional level, right? So try to think about that, guys. Don't think just about in marketing, we're selling a solution. We're selling more than that. Why do you think he's called Big Dreams? Dreams. People, that's it. Dream big. Go to your favorite snowboard resort in Austria or France, or Japan is one of the huge emerging snowboard countries as well. They've got amazing powder snow there. I think somebody told me recently there's an indoor, I think it's in Shanghai, just been built, or is it Shenzhen? I can't remember. It's like an indoor ski snowboard resort. Yeah, huge, massive. And it's almost like, not quite, but they're trying to replicate what it's like to go to the mountain, and it's all indoors. It looks amazing. I'd love to try it sometime. Um, so it's emotional. It's not. It isn't just, and we've got to think about that. It's really, really important. Okay, so let's move on then. Yeah, we talked about this retention, the economics. What we don't want to do is have a leaky bucket, right? So what Ben doesn't want to do at Big Dreams is he doesn't want to lose my business. That would be me leaking out of the bucket, right? Because you spend the money recruiting somebody, you get them, you build the loyalty, and then you kind of screw up, and you lose that customer. Okay. Yeah. So I think we've talked about this in in the example I've given, the 4 stages of the customer lifecycle, essentially, we want to try and get up to where our customers are literally almost our partners. Maybe they're even kind of co-creating or helping you to improve your service or even co-create a new service for you. And that's kind of like the level that we can kind of get to. So we just look at this then. So if we think about, strangers where you don't know anything about your customer, right? No current relationship exists. What do you have to do? You have to attract them. You have to acquire them, right? That's like the Google ads, the SEO, the AI. It's about the advertising on the ski. Remember I told you on the Winter Olympics, the Burton snowboards, etc. So your goal at the beginning is attract and acquire. So you have to think about, what marketing mix do I have that I can use to attract and acquire customers? And there's a good way to think about that, actually. Go over here. And again, it's probably touching a little bit on Mohammed stuff and digital, but it's basically, has he mentioned this yet, this framework? PISO, right? So P is paid, E is earned, S is shared, and O, owned. Yeah, I think you said owned. Okay, so there we go. PESO. Paid media, earned media, shared media, and owned media. Okay. I think you're probably already ahead of me and you know what these are. We kind of we looked at paid already. That was the Google ads, or it could be social media ads, right? Anything where you have to pay, paid advertising. We also saw earned, actually, because we saw the reviews. You were saying there was one of the companies had 5-star reviews. That's called earned media. Why do they use the verb to earn? Well, when you earn something, you win it, you work for it, and you earn it, right? So in other words, if I give great service, and I'm stepping away from the microphone now, I hope it gets picked up in the recording, but I'll come back over here. If I give a great service, I get a 5-star review. I have literally earned that review. Okay, so, and shared is where obviously, people will share on social media with their friends. Videos, like for example, if I do go on my snowboarding trip and, I have a GoPro camera or just somebody shoot something on their phone coming down the slope, you might write, having a brilliant time in Les Arcs, sun shining, snow is deep, the beer is cold, what's not to like, right? Something like that. That's, you're now sharing your experience with others. And notice there that what you're sharing isn't just functional, it's emotional. So you're actually appealing to people on different levels. And because you're sharing with your friends, you're much more trusted. Okay. And then the last one is owned. So that would be your website, that would be your Instagram, that would be your any digital, site you own, that's yours, owned media. Okay, so paid, earned, shared, and owned. And essentially what we're doing is across those 4 categories, we're using elements from each 4 to move the customer from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel, right? So now, very briefly, top of the funnel, right? Strangers, they don't know us, okay? We've got to try and attract and acquire them into the funnel. That means literally them clicking that ad on Google, right? That's top of the funnel. Now what happens after they click the ad? So they go through another stage, right? They land on your website. I'll just give you an example, a simple example here, right? Yeah, they like what they see. Images are nice. Content is informative. There's videos on there. I don't know, whatever. It's really easy to get in contact with the business. So they do that. A little pop-up says, "Oh, welcome to the website. We have a special offer for the next 7 days. Click here to get in touch." I'm just giving you a simple made-up example, right? So basically, what you're doing is you're going deeper. Now you reach out to them, you send them an email, and great, they come straight back to you in 10 minutes. Unbelievable. And they say, "Dear Philip, thanks for getting in touch. Yes, we have blah, 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 whatever." Okay, a nice email or a social post or whatever it is. And then you think, "Oh, this is great," right? Maybe you buy online or you go to the shop, right? So you go from digital to in person. Okay, you go, "Actually, I'm spending a lot of money. Next time I'm up in London or next time I'm in Southampton, I'll go into the shop," and that might be a few weeks, down the line. But it's basically was initiated here. And then of course we get down to here, we buy the snowboard, we have a great time, and not only do they sell us a snowboard, they tell us where the best place to go and snowboard in Europe is, right? Best place to do, whatever kind of snowboarding you want to do. So they're actually not just selling a product, they're a service, right? And that's why we have services marketing. Because very often, when you think a company is only selling you a product, in fact, what they're really selling you as well is a very, very good service wrapped around the product, perhaps. Okay. So, and then what happens is, well, we're so happy, but we went out there and somebody said, "Oh, your helmet's terrible. You need to get one of these helmets. They're the best." You think, I know just where I'm going to get one of those helmets. I'm going to get it for the same guys that sold me the snowboard because I trust them. Why would I go somewhere else? Why would I have the hassle of going somewhere else? I'll just go back there, right? And that's when you kind of lock in the relationship. Way back, I think it was Michael Porter, the famous strategy professor, said that he had this term switching costs. And what he meant by that is that what you try to do as a company is you try to increase the cost of your customer switching to a competitor. Now the cost isn't necessarily money, but it's also time. And time for a lot of people is money. If you're busy, particularly if you're working and you're not retired, for example, time is money. And therefore, that's this idea of retention again, keeping them locked in. And then I mentioned about coming back and buying the helmet, and that's what's called cross-selling or upselling with CRM. There's a great opportunity, once you have a trusted relationship with the customer, to cross-sell and upsell. Okay, so an upsell would be, for example, if I'm checking into the hotel and I'm a member of the loyalty program, and they might say, "Oh, we have a special room looking over the sea, has a lovely ensuite spa, blah, whatever it is," right? It is an extra $100 a night, but really worth it. And you're like, "Yeah, go on. I deserve it. I'll do that," right? So you've just upsold them. Okay, maybe based on your knowledge of them. Maybe they're a golfer, right? They love golf, and you've got a room that overlooks the 18th fairway of the golf course, and that guy loves golf, right? Because you've got this kind of database with all their preferred activities and stuff. So you leverage that information and you get an upset. So and that is where hotels, for example, and airlines and other service providers, that's where they can really make good profit, is through that. And actually, you're not exploiting the customer, you're not being nasty. In fact, you're giving them a good service and they're happy to pay for it. So that's what's called a win-win situation. Okay. So I'm sure, as I've shared examples with you from my own purchasing behavior. Honestly, I'm sure if you just think about companies you're loyal to, products or services or both, you could start to think about why you're loyal to them. How much money do you think you're spending with them over year to year? Think about your bank, maybe. If you're with a bank, right? I'm sure most of you have put your money in a bank somewhere, um, and that bank is making money from you every time you take money out, every time you send money to one country or receive money from another country. They're earning money on that, and they're investing your money that you deposit with them, and they're making money from that. How do you think banks are so rich? So and they are a really good example of lifetime value. I talked about this, I think, last week. So, you're all young now, you're students, but maybe listen, we all take different paths in our life, but you might then eventually, maybe have a family or have one or two kids, and then suddenly your priorities change. You need to send them to school, you need to maybe have different kind of health insurance or whatever. Where do you get it? Oh, you go to your bank. Well, that's what they want you to do, right? So as you go through different stages of life, you have different requirements. Maybe you'll buy a house and you need a mortgage. Who do you get your mortgage from? Your bank, right? Because they'll give you maybe a special offer because you're loyal to them, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we kind of move through this cycle of strangers, then they become acquaintance. We've got some awareness. Maybe they've tried something out. What we need to do is make sure we satisfy them. We want to reduce reduce the risk for the customer. Something to think about in services marketing, because it's intangible, the risk is higher. Why do you think the risk is higher because it's intangible? Why would that be? Why would there be a relationship between risk and intangibility, do you think?
I think, for example, if you, for example,
Yeah.
can't do that, if you know there's a missing, you can fix it immediately.
Yeah.
Then take it intangible. So it hidden. And then if the customer will say to you what they not satisfied
Mhm.
or happy with, you couldn't know, and then you might lose as customer.
Right, exactly. So, if you go into the Apple store in West Key, as I did recently, and that's a good store to go into if you want to think about the service scape. If you go into the Apple store, next time you're in West Key, pop into the Apple store, try not to spend too much money, and have a look at the service scape. It's interesting the way they've set it up. But there, if I buy the latest iPhone 17 or whatever it is, I know that if there's any problem with the phone, I can bring it back there within however many months. They'll replace it if there's a problem. I can have a chat with the guy there, the expert, and he'll tell me how much memory it has, what the camera's like, whatever. Okay, and it's tangible. I can see it. But let's go back to our snowboard holiday, going off to Austria, right, where I like to go, and it's intangible and it's risky because maybe there's a resort I haven't been to before. How close is the chairlift to my accommodation, where I go up the mountain? Will there be snow? Well, nobody can guarantee that. There's a whole number of factors, all of which, or a lot of which, are intangible. I can't see exactly what I'm buying. And if I go there and I don't like it, I can't bring it back. Right? That's it. But yet, that holiday, especially if it's like a group of you going, that could be several £1,000s. More, much more than the iPhone. So, the risk. So what we have to do with services is we have to do as much as we can to reduce that risk. And you want to start thinking about how you could do that as a services marketing firm or a services firm. Okay. Then we want to move. We want to move to really like friends. Maybe it's like a bit too strong a word. And to partners, right? We build our knowledge of the customer. Trust is established. Think about my example with Big Dreams, where I've been going for 10 or 15 years. right? His knowledge of me is built up, and the trust is there. Okay, so there's no problem with him looking for differentiation because he knows the kind of snowboarding I like to do, or what my needs are, or what my son is wanting to do, and he can actually make recommendations that are tailored to the customer based on knowledge. And then the last one is really about, like, the relationship becomes interdependent and resilient. Now, I'm not sure that I would say that my relationship with that snowboarding shop is kind of interdependent, or in some ways I'm a partner. I think that's probably going a bit too far. Certainly, though, in the B2B, in the business to business context. And let me give you this example, right? And then we'll take our 10-minute break. But I think this is a good example to move out of B2C and into, for a second, into B2B. So, what's happened there? So this is a company, as you can see, whose original, and still is, main focus of business, and they're based in Southampton, down at the docks, and they manufacture hovercraft. You probably know what I mean by hovercraft. Excuse me, there's lots of pictures on their website you can have a look at. But since 1956, so a long time, right? Kind of like not just the UK, but probably one of the world's leading experts in creating and building hovercraft, selling hovercraft around the world. They've got customers in India, Japan, the US, lots of different places, as well as the UK, which is great. Now, we recently had a project with them. I won't go into details, but I learned quite a bit because of the project of how they operate. And one of the main goals of the project, which went very successfully, was the opportunity for Griffin, which is the company you're looking at here, to pivot, right? Pivot is kind of like so if I pivot like this, that's a pivot, right? So that's me literally pivoting like that. But a pivot for a company, same kind of idea, is you turn from doing one thing to doing another kind of thing. Okay, so I'll explain what I mean in this case and why it's relevant to services. But so you can see here, that's the kind of like products they sell. It's very much manufacturing. So they have so it says here, at Griffin, we design and manufacture hovercraft, etc. Now they do that at their premises in Southampton on the docks, right next to the water. So they have a big warehouse where they make the hovercraft, they take them out on the water, they test them, and then they sell them and they get shipped off to Japan or the US or wherever it is, right? However, what they realized is that they have a lot of engineers who make these hovercraft. They're quite highly paid, quite technically, very technically skilled, but when they're not working on a hovercraft, they are essentially not doing anything, right? So they're literally doing nothing, but they're not being actively employed on building a hovercraft, right? Because in other words, they don't have orders that go through all the year where the engineers are busy every day of the year. There are times when they're down, so it's maybe a bit like this. Now, if you have a bunch of engineers that are highly paid and they're not working as actively as they could be, then that's a problem. That's a cost to the business. So what they realized they could do, and if I go to another part of the they added this thing called Griffin Marine Solutions to their portfolio of services or products, right? So while they were primarily product focused, the hovercraft, right, the actual building it, they are now as well a service business. Because what they're doing is they're using their, as it says here, they're using their engineering design expertise, right, to offer, there we go, tailored solutions. Can you see that here? Um, there, offering tailored solutions that address the evolving challenges of the maritime industry. In other words, they will send their engineers out to different countries, or maybe they'll do it in the UK, helping other places build their own ships or their own hovercraft. So they won't literally build it, but they'll provide the expertise and the design expertise to help others and charge for that. It's almost like more like a consulting model, consultancy. So I think that was an interesting example of where you have done a pivot, right? Pivot from being just a manufacturing company to also providing a service design area. And it's very smart because you think about it, as a company, they have what's their main asset as a company? Their main asset is their expertise, their managers and their engineers. So why not make the most of that and sell that as a service to others? And also, you think about it, it means you don't have the risk of investing a lot of money in a new shipyard or new manufacturing equipment, which is all very expensive. Okay, so it's a way of providing service, and I think where it links to our slide is this idea that the relationship becomes interdependent and resilient. So in that case with Griffin, if they if a shipyard in India says, "Yeah, we need your guys' expertise. Come on over, spend a couple of weeks here, help us design the hovercraft," da, 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 right? And then they go there for 2 weeks, and then they come back. That's not the end of the relationship, because they'll probably come back to them again and say, "Oh, that's great, but listen, we also need you to do this," or "You told us this, it's not quite working, how can we fix this?" Suddenly they become a partner that's kind of closer connected, right? And the more you're a bit like that, and you're like that, and you're like that, and you're like that, and then you're like that, right? You're linked like that, then you become interdependent. And it's very hard for the company, let's say the shipyard in India, should we go somewhere else? Let's just go back to Griffin because they were good, they helped us. We're going to build another hovercraft. Let's reach out to them again. They're the guys, and that's why that's why I think that's a good example of moving from all the way to like a partnership thing. But that's B2B. Because think about B2B. It's not like buying a snowboard, right? So the boatyard in India is going to be paying Griffin thousands of pounds, a lot of money for the expertise. It's high value. So often in B2B, the value of the sale is much, much higher than B2C. And that's sometimes why, by the way, you guys are looking for career opportunities after you graduate. Don't ignore the B2B sector, because sometimes the jobs are more highly paid, they're more resilient, you're probably less likely to be made redundant. And if you show good knowledge of the industry they work in, then they might be interested in recruiting somebody with marketing expertise. Because Griffin, one of the reasons they did the partnership with the university is that their expertise primarily lies in marine engineering. It doesn't as much lie in business and marketing, right? So that's why they benefited from the partnership with the uni, and there was somebody who worked for them and all the rest of it. So great. Listen, we've just gone after 2 o'clock, so we'll start again in 10 minutes. Let's take a break and relax for a while.
It's the only thing I need to decide was they want to build a homes. There's no any other approach. It's all about their force. They don't want to harm their force nature. We need to find a way how to meet some attractive ways to develop their towns. So we need to find a way. We need to consider biodiversity, wildlife homes. So hopefully things should be safe. Yeah. So, so one guys an idea about village community belt and then go to the rest. Use the community belt to there you go. No, yeah. Like, no one is like studying about developing infrastructure. What is engineering? What is like e-commerce? What is government? Money, natural marketing. Two of them know how to play the ball. Two of them don't know how to put it. Society. The ball. Yeah. Choose a hard topic.
So how many topics we find? I'm not around each project is 2 groups. So we try to
Tuesday is like what is this? Community has a lot of choice. Business is not necessary to share. At least one or twice a week. You don't have any like no, serve to just a second. Yeah. So next week, so what actually last week was to prepare presentation groups. So we're gonna meet him next week and to decide ideas as soon as possible and just start running presentations. So yeah, we can argue for so one is one is in detail. So we have to take the details discussion and give to you. And the presentation is a simple version. Make sure that it's to be all clear. Balance between
Yeah, it and when you went to we can use them and we can
Yeah, that's even when you make a phone, it costs a lot more.
that's why you yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I'm recommending. So you say to the original because I think something and then they are certain different and then get to the ice very good and then this morning I was normally go to sleep I have a long I'm not really good to very late. And now I have any
Okay, I think we'll start again. It's 10 minutes, so but I want to get to the end of this presentation, start the next one, or at least get because I've got a case study as well. So yeah, so that's where we left off, wanting to create this kind of higher level of relationship with the customer. So if we go to the next slide, then. So we've got this. You'll find this in the textbook as well. They talk about different bonds that we can build with the customer, and I think I can go through these remaining slides quite quickly because I think a lot of what I've covered before the break was sort of more or less, on this topic. Obviously, the foundation is that we need to give an excellent service. If we don't give the excellent service, we'll lose customers. They won't give us the 5-star reviews and all the rest of it. So, that's where your employees, your partners become so important, the people who are delivering the service on your behalf, right? So I mentioned the Apple store in Southampton, the guys who give you advice, they all have to be expert in their knowledge of Apple products. So let's just go through these bonds quite quickly. So the kind of lowest strength bond is really about price, finance, right? So trying to get customers through discounts, price incentives, right? Everybody likes a discount, but it's not necessarily the way that you build longer term loyalty. So the snowboarding shop I go to isn't the cheapest, but I would say it's the best, right? They're not the same thing, right? We're not always just interested in price. We want other things. So things like frequent flyer programs, hotel loyalty programs, they were criticized in the past because they were all about discounts and trying, get your points to get a free flight or get a free stay. Nothing wrong with that. But the problem with that is it doesn't differentiate the brand from your competitor. It's not all about being the cheapest or offering free things. Okay. So if, for instance, you were to look, I thought I might get you to do this, but we'll see how the time goes. We can maybe do it next week. But I had a look earlier at, let me close that, close that, close that, close that, close that, delete that, and close that. Yeah, so I was looking at the different, for example, I was looking at 2 competing airlines, British Airways welcome to the British Airways Club. And Virgin Atlantic, I thought I had their loyalty program. I'm not sure where that is. Let's see, be in here somewhere maybe. Flying Club, yeah, that's what they call it. Explore the Flying Club. Right. So Virgin call it the Flying Club, BA call it the British Airways Club. So straight away, they both got the word club in the title. What's the difference? Now, we won't do it now, but that might be something I would ask you to do as a potential customer of an airline. I also did it for hotels, and I would get you to compare the two loyalty programs. Which one looks more appealing than the other? What are they offering that you might find more persuasive? Or do they pretty much look the same? And if they look the same, where's the differentiator? Okay, so what you want to be doing with your loyalty program is you want to be looking for differentiation. It's the same thing applies to hotels. Marriott, I'm sure you've heard of Marriott hotels, right? So Marriott hotels has something called the Bonvoy program. I think it comes from the word the French bon voyage, which means have a good trip, have a good journey. Bonvoy, right? So that's their loyalty program. Then you've got Accor, which is the French hotel chain, which is an international global hotel chain, and their loyalty program. Okay, here it's called Voyager over here. You can see it, Voyager, and then I had another one, Hilton. Yeah, Hilton Honors, right? That's Hilton's. So again, you could look at Hilton, Accor, and Marriott and compare their loyalty programs. What are the features of each program? How do they relate to services marketing? How do they relate to relationship marketing? If you were working for Hilton and you looked at Marriott and Accor, is there anything you would change in the design of your program, but also the marketing of your program? Because on the website, this is remember, paid, earned, shared, and owned. What are we looking at here? Which of those four are we looking at here? Owned, right? This is Hilton's own loyalty program website. Okay, and there we go. Hilton Honors has just got more rewarding. Why is that? Well, it's going to tell us here somewhere. Fewer nights, same great perks, gold and diamond status, and there we go. So that's still based on, getting more stays, right? How often you stay and what you earn. But they're also trying to give you other features and upgrades that you get by being a member of Hilton Honors. Now, the thing we need to know if we're working for Hilton Honors is not only do we differentiate from the competition, but what is it that our customers truly value? And that's where you have to do your research. Interviews with your members, focus groups, with a few of them, reading their reviews online. You would have the employees in the hotel being empowered to ask the guest, oh, I see you're a member of our loyalty program. What is it you most like about the program? Then it's up to the employee to feed back to the manager, oh, I was just chatting to that guest. She told me the thing she really likes about the loyalty program is this. I thought you would like to know. Then the manager has got to feed it back up to the guys who run the loyalty program. So you see what's going on here? Guest, employee, hotel manager, central loyalty program. And that's why you need to have good training of employees. They feel they can ask the guests that, and when they tell the manager will then relay that back. Because remember, who is it that has the direct relationship with the guest? It's the employee. Okay, so it could be the waiter, could be the guy working at the bar, whatever it is. Okay, so we probably won't have time to do it in class, but maybe next week, or you do it in your own time, or do it for another It doesn't have to be hotels or airlines. It could be, banks or other institutions that, you want to compare. Okay, so we've got these bonds that we're trying to build, and we've said about the price as being kind of, pretty basic. This one here. So when it says it's highly imitable, it's very easy for your competitor to copy that. So like you just saw on the website there a minute ago, Hilton Honors said, if you stay X number of nights, you get whatever. Well, Marriott can just see that straight away and just do the same thing, just copy it. But if it's something more embedded in the relationship you have with the members of your loyalty program, that's much harder for Marriott or Accor to copy, because it's much more sophisticated. It's much more to do with the relationship you have with the guest. So very much harder to copy. So this is where we want to try and kind of, raise it up, where we kind of move to more interpersonal connections. Nameless customers become loyal clients. Where maybe, for example, the business traveler staying at, whatever city hotel, she's recognized when she checks in by the front desk. Oh, welcome back, whatever her name is, and that's the personal connection, obviously, and that's harder to imitate. And then we move on to kind of, where we can start to use data to fit the customer's needs, and then it talks about switching, right? So a lot of CRM obviously is based on customer data. Okay, and it's one of the challenges is how effective is the company at using customer data to personalize the offering. Okay, now you think about maybe some of the businesses that you buy from or services you pay for. Think about what they might know about you because you've given them your data. And by the way, you're not charging them for your data. You're giving your data free. Like every time you go on social media and the algorithm feeds you ads and content, that's because you have given your data for free to those tech companies. And there's a big debate in the media at the moment about these big tech companies like Meta and X and all that. And are they behaving ethically? Do they have too much power? Right? Are they in some way being deceptive a little bit about what they know? And so there's a big debate about that at the moment. But so basically using that data to customize. So at the moment, I've been with EE, the mobile phone provider, for quite a few years now. To be honest, I don't think really EE are doing a fantastic job at customizing their communications to me. It's okay when I reach out to them with a problem, and it's okay, it works okay, but they do have a lot of data on me now in terms of mobile phone, broadband, other numbers on my contract, and I don't really think they've done a great job at personalizing communications. Even when I went into the EE store in West Key recently in Southampton, there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the guy was offering me in the shop and what they were offering me over the phone. It was different. And I don't think that's good practice. I think they need to be more joined up, and they need to be using my data much better to give me offers that are more bespoke to me. Now, I'm not ready to switch to another mobile provider like Three, or I don't know who the other ones are, Vodafone or something. At the moment, I can't be bothered. It's too much hassle. And that's what we call the switching cost. It's just too much hassle because I'm going to have to go through a whole bunch of calls, stay on the phone, get emails. Oh my God, get another SIM. It just becomes too much hassle. And then we've got this last one, which I think is well illustrated by the example I gave you of the hovercraft company, which is more what you'd call a deeper structural bond. A bond, by the way, is You're bonded with something, you're joined. And we learned, didn't we, that there's a strategic connection between the Griffin engineers and the shipyard, let's say in India, I think was the example I was giving. So they become much more interconnected at a strategic business level. Okay, and therefore it would be much harder for that shipyard to break the bond. Because if they break the bond, they have to go and find other engineers from somewhere else, and they don't know anything about them. And not only that, they have to spend time bringing those engineers up to speed with what they do. And that takes time, and time is money. So we, coming to the end of this CRM, this one, and then I can show you a case, and then maybe I'll get into the services marketing mix next week. I think there's quite a bit of overlap, and I did do quite a bit on sort of elements of marketing, like the PESO framework earlier. But anyway, there's this kind of thing of the value exchange or equation. So we need to think about the value for the firm and the value for the customer, right? And obviously what we're looking for is that nice win-win balance where the firm has lower costs to serve. We talked about not having the advertising costs, right? Maybe also costs to do with educating the customer about our solution, right? We can save on those costs. We also get referral, we get positive word of mouth. Basically me saying, if you want to buy a snowboard, go to Big Dreams, right? And then we might also get improved employee retention. So generally speaking, if you have guests coming back to your hotel and they're loyal and to the brand, that's a happier environment in which to work as an employee. And also if I say to my manager, oh, the guest just told me that she loves this about the loyalty program, and I get rewarded for that information, then that's also how you make the employee part of the relationship. So when we talk about customer relationship marketing, we should also talk about employee relationship marketing. ERM and CRM, right? Employee relationship marketing. Rewarding our staff for initiative, for reaching out to the customer, communicating back to the manager, etc. Then on the customer side, we build their confidence. The customer has trust and reduced anxiety. So if you're that shipyard in India and you're going to build a hovercraft that's going to cost millions to build, probably, that's a hell of a lot of money. That's going to raise your anxiety and your stress levels, right? You've got to get it right. So if you've got 3 engineers coming over from the UK to help you design it better, you've got to have trust in them. And if they deliver and you build a hovercraft and everybody says it's fantastic, then, great. So it's about support as well, and it's about, special treatment and all of that, preferential treatment. So, we talk then about, in terms of loyalty programs, oftentimes you have this kind of pyramid, but what you're kind of aiming for really are customers that are highly profitable, right? They're highly profitable because you've got that, lifetime value. They buy more than one service from you. They may start off just buying the snowboard, but then they buy the other equipment, then they ask you to service the snowboard, and then other things, right? So profitable. They're not price sensitive, so they will buy something more expensive from you than they could get it elsewhere because they trust you and you give them great service. It's not all about price. I'm sure you can relate to that. I bet you don't all buy the cheapest thing. Okay, you could, but you don't, and there's a reason for that. And you're committed. You're committed to the relationship. Okay? That doesn't mean, for example, if you're a business traveler and you go to London, do you always stay in a Hilton? No, you might not. You might stay sometimes in a Marriott, sometimes in an Accor. But generally, you gravitate towards Hilton because you're part of the loyalty program. And hopefully, if there is a Hilton there, that's where you'll stay. Okay, so So yeah, so that's the kind of gold standard or the platinum standard at the top, and then it kind of goes to the bottom where you might even have customers who are maybe even costing the company money. Because if you're operating a loyalty program and you have somebody who's a member but never stays, they're a cost, and you've got to remove them from your program in a nice way, of course. But you want to get them out. You want to get those out who are no longer intending to stay or to buy from you again. Okay, because it's a cost to administer that program. Yeah, so you've got to sometimes get people out of the system who are no longer worth keeping loyal. Let's say. I think this is the last slide. Yeah. So back to our gaps. Do you remember our gaps model? So if you've forgotten that, maybe time by time, just read that first couple of chapters of the book. Remind yourself what these provider gaps are. But one of them is the listening gap, right? So when a firm does not know what customers expect, right? They don't know anything about expectations. That's a big problem, right? Because then how do we serve our customers if we don't know their jobs to be done? Remember, those expectations and jobs are functional, social, and emotional, right? They're not just practical jobs oftentimes. So the solution then, CRM, kind of acts as a bridge. It builds these strong relationships and provides the intimacy and insight to close the gap. So we start to get to know our customers. We get to know what value they really look for, what's meaningful to them on a personal level. Okay, and then so in conclusion, I guess you can say the CRM is the architecture, which is the kind of whole ecosystem of listening, responding, and evolving. It's no good just listening to the customer and not doing anything about it. That would be like you saying to me, "Hey, Philip, I like your lectures, but I wish you would do this and not do this." Then if I go, "Oh, thanks for telling me," and I do nothing about it, how are you going to feel? You're going to feel you're not listened to. Okay, but if you tell me and I think it's fair and I adapt, you're going, "Oh, okay, it was listening, that's good, and good service. I've responded." And the lecture has evolved. Because again, back to my thing about earlier, we're in a co-creation mode here. I know we're not having a lot of discussion in class, but we've had a bit, and you're listening and you're kind of responding. It might be you're just typing stuff into your laptop, whatever it is, or it's eye contact, or you're nodding your head, smiling. This is all the response, right? And so we're kind of co-creating. So in other words, we're evolving the lecture. It's not just me that determines the output of this lecture, it's you as well. I'm not here talking to an empty room. I'm here talking to a bunch of people, and and that's a good example, I think, where we're kind of co-creating the service effectively together. So we'll finish this one, but we've still got some time left. Let me just find my other presentation, which is like a little case study. We'll finish off the CRM stuff, I think, and then I'll finish off the services marketing mix in the next session. So I'm moving now to the case study. So if I just pull that up, and then you can have a look, because that's also available to you on Blackboard, right? But in last week's section. Okay. So I'm conscious there's a slide deck on services marketing which I haven't touched on yet. But I will get to it, so don't fret. But I thought it'd be good just to kind of, go through a little case study quickly with you. And I think it's worth saying as well that everything in marketing is interconnected in any case. So we've actually touched today on quite a bit to do with the product, with promotion, paid, earned, shared, and owned media. So we're already kind of touching on, but there's more I'll do next week with you. So just kind of keeping the idea of kind of service and hotels, This is Marriott. We talked about Marriott already, didn't we? With the Bonvoy loyalty program, where they, we talked about this idea of, do you remember there was the financial bond, and then there was the kind of more higher level bonds? So the financial bond would be points are a currency, not a relationship. So the trap programs like stay 5 nights, get one free, in a way, make customers feel they can always get the cheapest deal. You've got to be careful with that, because you don't want your brand to be associated with cheap, 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 right? Because what happens if you keep competing on price? Your profitability goes down and your brand is damaged. Okay, so you've got to be careful. You've got to get that balance between the price and the brand. And what the result is what's called commoditization. If you become a commodity, you're easily replaced by another commodity. There's nothing to separate you except price. So you always go for the cheapest deal. And some people go for that, but they're typically customers who won't make your business profitable. Remember, the next time you get on an airplane, you go up the steps onto the plane. It's a big plane, like you're flying back to, you're flying to Shanghai or New York with the big plane. If you turn left, where the first class is and the business class is, all the passengers sitting there are subsidizing the passengers sitting at the back of the plane. So if you're flying on economy, you're being subsidized effectively by people sitting in first class, business class, or club class, because they're paying full price, oftentimes thousands of pounds to be there. Oftentimes, the people sat at the back of the plane paying £400 or £500 for their flight are actually losing the airline money because of the costs of being at Heathrow, the fuel to take off, paying the pilots, paying the cabin crew. It's expensive to run an airline, right? So you have to think a little bit about the costs involved as well when you look at a business model, right? So we want to try and build these kind of relationships, not commodities, I guess. Now, Salesforce, I just mentioned, in case you wonder what this is, Salesforce, and that's worth having a look at next time. You don't have to do it now, but there's a lot of technology that supports CRM. Any company that has a CRM program, like a bigger company, will have a technology solution to enable their CRM. And one of the big providers is a company called Salesforce. Been around for many years, and they have a solution called Customer 360. That means 360 degrees. They're called 360 degrees because you want to have a 360 degree view of your customer. As much as about their behavior as you can see. Okay? When was the last time they bought? How much did they pay for it? What are they thinking of buying in the future? Do they have any complaints? When's the last time they called your customer service desk? When's the last time they were staying in one of your hotels? What type of room did they stay in? Did they use the spa? Did they use the golf course? Did they come alone? Did they come with their family? Maybe they come on business, then they come with their family. Bum, 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 bum. You see how much information there is? 360 degree view of the customer. That's why Salesforce, pitches itself as a solution to enable a company to have a 360 degree view of its customers. So definitely worth Googling not just Salesforce, but maybe one or two other CRM technology providers, because they will also have interesting articles about CRM and loyalty on their website. And you can see what sort of technology features do they have and how do they enable better CRM. Because some companies make the mistake of thinking CRM is just about technology. And I would say it's not. CRM is the enabler. It's kind of like it's what's behind the scene, but ultimately it's that customer-facing interaction, particularly with employees, that really, really matters. Okay. So yeah, on this slide you can see here, I was just giving you an example, but here's some of the touch points in a hotel. The front desk where you check in, the spa where you go to relax, you use the mobile app, you eat in the restaurant, people from housekeeping, come to clean your room. These are all customer touch points. And there'll be many more, of course. These can all be fed and captured into the Salesforce system. Okay? Important, of course, your customer knows you're capturing all this information, right? Because data protection is very important. I think, I'm not a lawyer, but the data protection legislation is tighter in Europe than it is in the US. I'm not sure about China or other parts of the world. You might know that yourselves, but there's always legislation that protects the customer. What are you allowed to keep about the customer? Information about them. Do they know you're keeping that information about them? Have they given you permission to do so? And if they are keeping information about you and they haven't told you, and they some way misuse that information, they could be liable to go to court or even pay a very large fine. And there's good examples of that over the years. So you got to be careful with that. But yeah, oftentimes the problem in the past is a hotel or maybe an airline had these what are called legacy systems. These were almost like little bits of technology. So for example, when you check in, there might have been something called a property management system, but that wouldn't speak to the website, or that wouldn't speak to the email marketing team. So the email marketing team would be using their own database that wouldn't speak to the check-in desk. What you want is one system that gives you a single view of the customer. But the problem, and it's probably still a problem, is that it's what's called legacy. Legacy means old systems that were maybe built 10 years ago and are not fit for purpose at the moment. Particularly as we move, with AI and a lot of things happening with technology now, there needs to be much more agile systems that enable you to have this kind of unified view of the customer. This is what you want, this kind of 360-degree view, right? So, and I guess what we're looking to do is not just react, but be proactive. So know the customer likes this, and we'll provide that without even telling them. How delighted will they be? If you told the hotel on your last stay, my stay was great, the only problem was this, and then you check in and they've set the air conditioning at the temperature that you like. Wow. I mean, who has that experience, right? That's personalized, they're remembering you, they're building that bond. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm sure you've read the text while I was talking. So I think that illustrates that quite nicely. This is about anticipating and predicting, not just reacting to a customer, okay? And yeah, you know about this triangle by now. I think this is an important triangle: employees, customers, and the company. We know about internal marketing, right? Employees, we've talked about that quite a bit. So in a way, the employee is the brand. Okay, no point Marriott spending millions of dollars on advertising campaigns if you then check in and you get disappointing service, or it's this thing, you've overpromised and underdelivered. We have to make sure we do it the other way. Okay. So, in other words, the person on the front desk doing the check-in doesn't see the guest as just a platinum member of the loyalty program, but they see that this is the 10th time they've stayed, and the last time they had an issue. Their food was cold, their room service was cold, the room was too cold, and you just simple statement, sorry, I saw last time you had this problem. It won't be a problem this time. It's been fixed, and right? So you want to have that. So you need to give employees on the front line the knowledge and the technology to give customers a great service. Because oftentimes it's not the fault of the employee that something goes wrong. What happens if you go into Starbucks and you have the app and the app doesn't load properly, or you know you should be getting a free drink but it doesn't come? And then what happens is you complain to the guy serving you the coffee. It's not his fault, but you take it out on him because he's the Starbucks brand. Who else are you going to complain to? And then he's annoyed. He thinks, oh, bloody hell, you're making my day unpleasant. It's not my fault. Then he gets angry with Starbucks. He gets angry with the guys who run the app. So the whole thing's a lose, lose, lose instead of a win, 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 right? So that's why you got to have this, that's why it's a whole system. And all the behind the scenes stuff, the training, the technology, that enables the front line. That's why when you look at the customer journey, you've got backstage and front stage. You think about a theatre, when you go to see a play in London, the West End, you see the actors on the stage, you enjoy them, but what you don't see is all the things that happen behind the stage to make that a success. The lighting, the props, everything. Right? And so that's front stage, backstage. It's the same when we have a service. All the backstage stuff that makes it happen. Okay, guys, I know I haven't covered the whole services marketing mix with you, but I think it's been a good session. We've had a good chat. We've looked at examples. We've kind of talked about core principles of services marketing and CRM. We'll build on this next week for the mix. And yeah, upwards and onwards. Okay, thanks.